Hey, it's the Grit Daily Like a Boss podcast, and we're very excited to welcome OmniPublic as our first sponsor. OmniPublic is the premier North American marketing agency for startups, and you can learn about all the wonderful marketing programs that they have to get your startup going by taking a look at omnipublic.global. Hey everyone, welcome back to Like a Boss. You've got Loralyn Mears here representing Grit Daily, and we have got a super special guest today. Well, we always have special guests, you know this. Her name's Katie Ferraro. She is the founder of Fortified Family, and she has one of the top podcasts on the air right now, Baby-Led Weaning. It's all about how do you help new mothers and fathers try to focus on the nutritional needs of their children. She created a course for Coursera, which has been consumed more than 100,000 times across 100 countries, learning all about nutrition and the unique science behind it. She spends her time between managing quadruplets and a couple of other children, working as an assistant clinical professor at the University of San Diego and a nutrition lecturer. So with that, Katie, welcome.
Hello. Hi. Thank you so much for having me.
So first, just thank you so much for coming to Like a Boss. And let's just set things up. We were talking just a moment ago about, you had to go and do something at the school because you've got not one, not two, not three, not four, but how many kids?
Okay. Stop count. So I have 7 kids. We have a singleton, we have a set of quadruplets, and then we have a set of twins as well. So they're all very active. So I was, of course, late to our interview, but I'm late to everything. That's okay.
And, I think that I can imagine that one of the questions you probably get asked a lot, I mean, beyond the nutrition, is how do you, as a very, very busy mom, manage this large business and being an assistant professor and as a podcaster? Can you tell us, what that magical formula is, or is there
Gosh,
none for
well,
balance?
I do not know the answer to that. I feel like I do a little bit of all of it, not any of it very well. But I've always worked as a parent and I always wanted to work as a parent. So I did take some time off when I was pregnant with quadruplets. It's a very high risk pregnancy, as you can imagine, with a 50% chance of major handicap. So I actually, when my quadruplets, before they were born, I actually took my entire business online, knowing that very likelihood I would need to stay home with my kids. Very thankfully, they were born at 34 weeks. They were in the NICU only for a month. They're all very healthy, active 5-year-olds now. But since that time, I always ran my business online, which actually just ended up becoming more efficient. I feel like over time, with lots of kids and lots of business things, you just become more efficient. So I would say a lot of that was due to just being able to do things online so I can still spend time with my kids, but I can still run a full-time business.
One of the things I believe our readers would be really curious about is that this whole balance and this work from home, which some people would argue kind of went, I don't know, a little bit south over the last few years, but now in the wake of COVID, it's come front and center again. What are you seeing with respect to trends and interest in working from home and flexibility?
A lot of the girls that I say girls because I work in a predominantly female dominated industry. I'm a registered dietitian. I teach parents how to start solid food safely with baby-led weaning. So it's an alternative to traditional spoon feeding. Most of the folks who work for me happen to also be females, although we do have some males on our team as well. Younger than myself. I'm 42 years old, and most of my team is in their 20s or their 30s. Very different expectations. Like they love the flexibility of working from home. I love working with them because they are available at all times. Like I have a weird schedule. I have to do kid stuff in the middle of the day. I have to run to school. After they go to bed, I can sit down and work, and half my team, I can see that they're working at the same time as well. So I feel like there's no expectations to be working around the clock. One thing I do notice though, is this generation is getting much better at setting boundaries. They'll say, this is when I'm going to be in, this is when I'm going to be out. If they're going to run late on something, like they're just really good at communicating, kind of understanding that like the whole 9 to 5 is out the window, it's done. And I'm totally fine with that. I think we live in a global community. We live in a global workforce at this point, work when you can, but I love the flexibility, especially of people one generation younger than me.
Yeah, that's not so far from where you are, but yes. Now, if we look back and we see the success that you've had, really even in the last 4 years, your podcast alone has just skyrocketed to stratospheric levels of viewership and listenership. What do you think it is? What do you think caught on about it?
I think when I think about myself as a mom, a working mom, when I was starting to solids with my oldest, it was a terrible experience. We struggled immensely with traditional spoon feeding. And I remember at that time, like the height of my feeding frustration was when we found out we were pregnant with quadruplets. And I remember the first thing thinking, like, how am I going to feed 4 babies at one time when I can't even feed the one baby that I have at home right now? And so fast forward to when they were in the NICU, I kind of threw myself whole hog into learning everything I could about baby led weaning. And there's so many different platforms you can learn from these days. But I found that the best thing to do is to the platforms that you're most native on. Like I am a digital native when it comes to some platforms, and then other things like I just can't wrap my head around. So we kind of went whole hog. I'm like, what do I do as a busy working mom? I read my email barely. I look at Instagram when I have a chance, and I listen to podcasts all day long. So when my business started taking off, there's always the temptation to be on every single platform. And rather than trying to do everyone mediocre, I was like, we're going whole hog on email marketing, Instagram, and then the podcast was the natural third pillar because parents are out there looking for this information. And just like your podcast, short and sweet, nobody has all day to sit down and hunt and peck all over the internet. I like to give short, actionable snippets for my parents and caregivers who listen, and podcast is the perfect opportunity. Instagram's wonderful for showing the visual of how we prepare a lot of the foods and how we actually feed a baby. But for the little bits and pieces about, milestones or interviewing experts, the podcast just makes perfect sense. And I think we kind of hit the ground running. We launched during COVID, the first week of May in 2020, went right to number 2 in parenting, which it wasn't an accident. And we had a very, very strategic podcast launch. Like, if you're going to do it, we're going to do it right. And I kind of feel like having a good team and having a strategy was so helpful. And we've stayed top 20 consistently in parenting since our launch. And I think it's because parents appreciate short, concise bits of information that they can use right now.
Fantastic. Congratulations for holding that status. And so another thing that I'm interested in learning about, you focused your career and your background in that and learning to be a dietitian and focusing on nutritional health and different ways to be able to achieve that, with a large emphasis, I think, on some of the adult learning and education. Was it, as I say, necessity is the mother of all invention? Was it because of the own challenges that you were having with your eldest child that directed your path into this to help baby-led weaning? Is that what
Yes,
prompted
absolutely. I think necessity is the mother of invention. Like when you have multiples, when you're dealing with multiple kids, even one kid, it's a lot of work. And you don't want to replicate mistakes. Like, fool me once, the spoon feeding thing with my oldest daughter was terrible. Like I started too early and we were doing rice cereal and basically force feeding her, and it didn't feel natural. And so I knew there had to be a better alternative. And when I learned about baby-led weaning and then realized there's a lot of great info about what it is or why it's better than spoon feeding, but there wasn't great information about how to do it. After I figured out how to do it and I put together what's now a patented 5-step feeding framework, basically you introduce your baby to 5 new foods a week. It works out so that your baby can try 100 different foods before the time they turn 1. And all the research shows us that that's how we raise independent eaters. That's how we prevent picky eaters. Babies can eat so many more foods than we currently give them credit for. I think just understanding that was possible, and then people seeing really is believing. And so I already had a rising media or social media presence with the quadruplets. But once they started eating, man, that visual of 4 babies feeding themselves, and they're eating sardines at their 6-month adjusted age, and they're learning how to eat beets and, just not your traditional typical baby foods. People are like, wait, that's really interesting. How'd you learn how to do that? And then it kind of clicked for me. Like, I've been an educator all my life, always teaching at the college level for nutrition, but like, here's parents who are struggling with the same exact thing that I am. And so using social media to help share that message, and then refining it over the years into organized programs and into digital products that I sell. And we do a ton of free information as well, but there are paid products as well if parents are interested. Just trying to have just so that the information is out there, that no matter where you are in your feeding journey, you can hopefully learn something about a safer way to feed your baby than traditional parent-led spoon feeding.
With all the engagement that you've had through Food and Nutrition Magazine and all of the outreach, not only through your podcast, but just through your business, Fortified Family, as well, has anything surprised you that just came across your desk and you went like, wait, what?
One thing that surprises me a lot is the misinformation that parents still get. And unfortunately, a lot of parents, social media is everywhere, and there's just just as many credentialed professionals there doing great work. There's just as many people who have no business teaching other people how to feed their babies. So we have bloggers and nutritionists. And just so your audience knows, the term nutritionist means nothing. Any of you could go online right now and get a nutritionist certificate for your cat if you wanted to. I'm so surprised how much misinformation about feeding is out there. I do a lot of work with pediatricians. I very much value and respect pediatricians, but unfortunately, they're still perpetuating a lot of myths like you need to wait 3 to 5 days between introducing new foods to your babies, and things that we know are not steeped in research, that babies can eat foods much more quickly and they should be exposed to more foods more quickly. So it's almost like job security in a way. Like there's a lot of work to be done, but I also just encourage our audience to, look at the source where you're getting your information from. Does that person have a credential? Is this what they do full time? Because not only is a lot of the information untrue, but it also can be very unsafe about what foods we can feed babies at different ages. If you're not careful where you're getting your information from, it can be actually quite dangerous.
And of course, you bring all that credibility. I mean, you're a clinical professor at the University of California, San Diego. So that just puts a little bit of weight behind the words that you say, right? Versus these weekend nutritionist certificate type people.
Exactly. And I know like not everyone can go to a college level course about nutrition. It's exactly why I love using social media to teach parents and to teach caregivers. I think it's important. I teach healthcare practitioners as well. We teach pediatricians and occupational therapists, speech language pathologists, but still at the end of the day, the parent is the primary feeder and caregiver, and we need to make sure that they know how to feed their baby safely as well.
I've learned never to assume anything, but I'm going to ask you what the hardest thing is that you ever had to do, and thinking maybe it's something else besides giving birth to quadruplets. I don't know. You tell us.
Yes, being pregnant with quadruplets was the hardest thing because of the constant fear. Okay, there's a 50% chance of major handicap, and how am I going to deal with this? And we were getting pressure to reduce down to 2. And how do we explain that that's not our decision? And dealing with the emotions of that. Plus, we had a toddler at the time. I do think being pregnant when you have a toddler is like the worst thing ever. And then when I was pregnant with the twins, I had quadruplet toddlers, and that was just pure insanity. I mean, I look back and I think we had 7 kids, 3 and under for a while. I don't know how we did it. We managed. And I always think every stage is hard, but that was pretty hard. But I think just being pregnant when you have fear on your mind is really hard, because that the stress is not good for you or for the baby, and people tell you not to stress. It's just like when they tell you not to stress when you're trying to get pregnant, and you're like, I know that I'm having trouble conceiving. I don't need your opinion about my stress level. It's something that I'm glad I did, but I'm glad I never have to do again.
Oh, indeed. I can't even imagine. That sounds nightmarish. So if we move along here and say, all right, so that was clearly something that was very challenging. But if you had to go back and I said, hey, you get some magic beans and you get to go undo something, would anything be different?
Oh my gosh, I love your questions. I'm going to steal half of these.
Sure.
Okay, and I like that I didn't get to know them ahead of time, because I would have mulled over and thought over this one a lot. Anything professionally, personally, I'm trying to
wide open, whatever you want to share.
You know what? I feel really good to say, no, I wouldn't do anything different.
And would you be surprised if I told you that more than 2/3 of my guests answer that way? They all say, yeah, all the experiences that I've had for good and for bad shaped who I am, and I wouldn't undo any of it.
I love that. Thank you for making me realize that today.
Yeah, it's a good place to be. And I think it's also part of what feeds into resilience. We hear a lot about that lately, especially in Generation Next, the snowflake generation. Wait a little bit of heat and they melt. And so people are trying to find ways to build their resilience, and hearing about stories like this from entrepreneurs like yourself, and not even just on the entrepreneurial side, which you've achieved there. Like you said, having 7 children under the age of 3 at a time. Yeah, if you can do that and not build resilience, then you've done something wrong, right?
And laugh about it. That's the other thing. I share a lot on social media, and parents you always seem like you're having a good time. I'm like, well, obviously I'm not filming me screaming at them, but you do have to be able to laugh at yourself. You do have to be able to have a good time with it. And I love that you're calling out the term resilience. I just finished reading Grit by Angela Duckworth.
Oh, yes.
And it's I love that idea. I love all of the vignettes in that book, and just how, I'm shaping the lives of 7 different people along with my husband and all of our family and friends who help us along the way. Because to be honest, with the risk of sounding trite, it does take a village, and you can't do this all on your own. And I'm very open about sharing that I do have people help me. I have wonderful babysitters. I have great neighbors that I rely on. My mom just picked up my quadruplets and my sister's twins are all in the same preschool because on Wednesdays we both work and we can't do it. So, knowing that you can't do all of it by yourself, I think is important. And then being willing to ask for help. That's one thing I've learned. I think I'm a little bit older than a lot of the moms, at least of my kids' age. The other moms are always like, you're good at saying no. I'm like, yes, you have to be good at saying no, and you have to be good at asking for help. Those things will help you become resilient, I think.
Oh, indeed. And to that end, that is my next question. Great segue, Katie. Can our audience do anything to help you?
Oh my gosh, I love this question as well. If you are of the age where you're having children or your babies are going to be starting solid foods, question the way it's always been done. And I would encourage you to take a look at alternatives to the way things have always been done. And that's one thing I've learned as a parent too. Like, just because we've always done it this way doesn't mean we have to. Just because you can take a spoon and put it in a baby's mouth does not mean that you should. So if you are interested in learning more about alternatives to traditional spoon feeding, raising independent eaters, and preventing picky eating, I'm on Instagram at Baby Led Wean Team. We are a team. We're all here to help each other through this important and critical transition in our babies' lives.
Oh, fantastic. We'll be sure to send people there with a link in the podcast right up. All right, Katie, last question, most important of the podcast after we've talked about raising 7 children and finding ways to get them to eat all of the wonderful foods out there instead of, I know some children that the kid only eats ketchup and French fries. And I look at that and go, I think that's a parenting problem. But we'll save that soapbox for another side. So back to the most important question of the podcast. If we peeked into your closet and we found a pair of shoes that best represented your personality, are we looking at a pair of boots, stilettos, sneakers, flats, flip-flops, or something else?
100% flip-flops.
You are a flip-flops gal. Okay.
Because then you can't see flip-flops on Zoom. It doesn't matter, they're comfy.
I have flip-flops on right now. That is
I
what I
have
do.
them on right now too.
All right, Katie. So with that, that is a wrap. Thank you so much, Katie Ferraro, founder of Fortified Family and host of the leading podcast, Baby Led Weaning, and the whole program that goes along with that. Thank you so much for being a guest on our show today.
Thank you for having me.